The Queen and Prince Philip drove from Buckingham Palace in a magnificent open carriage. It's properly called a barouche. In fact, it's the one that Queen Mother, the Queen Elizabeth, uses each year when she drives from Buckingham Palace to Horse Guards for the Trooping the Colour ceremony. But here today, it was bringing the Queen and Prince Philip to this great children's party in Hyde Park. Not far, of course, from the palace to Hyde Park, but the Queen had earlier on expressed a wish that sometime during the International Year of the Child she should be able to take part in one of the major functions and emphasize her interest in IYC and her care and her concern for the children of the world, particularly those perhaps underprivileged, certainly less fortunate than some of the others. And so it was this magnificent procession led by an escort of the Blues that brought her in to the arena and round in front of, getting on for 50,000 cheering children to be welcomed by the Vice Lord Lieutenant of Greater London, Admiral Sir Charles Madden. And then in turn, Sir Charles presented the Lord Mayor and the Lady Mayoress of Westminster, and then the chairman of the organising committee of the whole function, Mr. Neville Lebovich, and then on to meet the chairman of the executive committee, Lady Soames, and Major Michael Parker, who is the producer of this great party. So the Queen and Prince Philip had duly arrived, and the excitement was intense. On the arrival of the Queen, of course, the national anthem was played by the band of the Welsh Guards. Then it was time for the Queen to set off the fireworks and give the signal for several thousand balloons to go up into the sky over Hyde Park. Remarkable sight as up in the sky the fireworks almost met the balloons, and off they went across London, across Park Lane, down Constitution Hill, some of them drifting, it seemed, over Buckingham Palace, many of them of course going off over the homes of the children who'd been dancing. So the balloons were on their way, the party was under its way, and it was time for 3 cheers for the Queen. One of the main events going on during the morning was the procession of bands that was marching its way, winding its way snake-like around the great arena that was forming the party. And of course, what children's party would be complete without some Disney characters? Led by Mickey and Minnie, followed by Donald, then the inevitable bouquet, but perhaps the rather unusual orange, which the Queen was quick to pass on to her police officer. Keep it for later perhaps, but it wasn't time for the Queen to have an orange. And still more presentations, because the Queen, now on her way to the International Village, received the most beautiful garland, delightfully presented by that lovely little girl in a sari. The International was out on foot presentations. See meeting people involved with the charitable side of the work of the International Year of the Child, and also those involved with Fair Play for Children, a group of people who are very much concerned that playgrounds should be made as safe as possible for children. Lovely, lovely bouquet of flowers there to go with the little posy the Queen received just a minute or two earlier. Fair Play for Children organisation, as I say, very, very active indeed in promoting safety in children's playgrounds, making as certain as possible that the children can have as much fun as possible, but without any risk, or with as little risk as may be. Another bouquet there, this time from a delightful young lady in a wheelchair. What a moment for her. Now, just in a moment or two, the Queen will have come to the Rainbow Tent, named after the Thames television programme, and it's there that she's going to see the portraits of herself that have been painted by children in a rainbow competition. She's going to see those that reached the last stages, and then she's going to be presented with the winning entry. We happen to know that it was painted by Scott Beasley, and at the moment she meets Geoffrey Hayes from Rainbow, and just behind there in the red, Jenny Hanley from Magpie. But it's Geoffrey who's going to take the Queen in to meet some of these young artists who've been working away and producing their idea of the Queen, well, if not on canvas, at least on paper. Now Geoffrey is showing the Queen those winning entries. It'll be fascinating for the Queen to see herself as children see her. And that's it. That's the winning portrait of the Queen. And Scott, is he going to make the presentation himself? Well, almost. Now Geoffrey and Jenny just helping him there. That was a lovely moment. I hope they've got some photographs of that to put in the album. They talked to some of the press photographers nicely. I know that they'll be able to get hold of some. So now the Queen knows what, at least what Scott thinks she looks like, and some of the others too. Of course, she's no stranger to seeing portraits of herself. She must have sat for more official portraits than, well, anybody else in the world. Now I'm certain of that. Well, a good long time there at the Rainbow Tent, and obviously fascinated by those portraits. Some of them really were very, very good indeed, showing remarkable insight and inventiveness and style. Anyway, it's now the Queen and Prince Philip went on towards the circus tent, and in a minute or two you're going to see that they'll be walking past a rather unusual guard of honour. Good long chat about circus life and what goes on under the big top and on the road. And there, I don't know whether you noticed then, just coming into the left of your picture, a hint of 6 ladies who are forming a guard of honour. Now there we are, the right eye of one of the circus elephants. 6 elephants, very well travelled. All ladies, as I say, perform around the world, and they certainly work when they're on tour. They give 3 performances a day as a rule, and they've brought delight to many people over the years. That bouquet looks rather tempting, thinks one of the elephants. The Queen holds on to it. Queen's more used to horses than elephants, of course. And now she'll be meeting some more stars of the big top. The jugglers, and the acrobats, high wire, I never can say that, high wire artists, trapeze artists, and going on into the circus tent. All this while, of course, while the Queen was making her tour, other things were going on throughout the great area set aside for this great children's party. Remarkable operation getting it ready, and everybody was so generous in giving of their time. And over in the International Village, the dancers, well, the Indian dancers had been replaced by these very elegant, beautifully dressed girls. But the Queen was back in the Range Rover once more with Prince Philip. She was, if she cared to think about it, driving through a rather special area. This whole party arena had been fenced by 6,000 feet of exterior fencing, and inside there were another 13,000 feet of smaller fencing. The whole thing was being powered by 40 electricity generators. And to make sure that nobody went short of water, there were 3 tankers of water with 2,000 gallons in each of them. There the Queen and Prince Philip were driving past just a few of the 120 tents that had been put up. And to keep everybody fully informed, 10 public address systems were squawking away. I don't know what public address systems do. They were talking away if they weren't squawking away. Queen Prince Philip probably just caught a glimpse of these 2, or these 3 rather, as they drove past. This is the great dinosaur battle. So that's how they became extinct. Wonder if David Attenborough knows about this. By about this stage, the Queen and Prince Philip had been at the party for well over an hour, but no signs of them leaving just yet. An occasion that the Queen very obviously was enjoying very much indeed. And on the Queen's left, the lady is Judith Stone, who is the director of the International Year of the Child. And on her right, just so you know who everybody is, Commander Mike Trastrail, the Queen's police officer. Don't know who owns those hands, but where there's a camera these days, you can be certain there'll be hands. You only had to spend about a few seconds here today to realize the international flavor of this party. It really was a wonderful occasion for children from all over this country, from many other parts of the world, and children whose parents had come to this country from many other parts of the world. Wasn't all children there, some of the older folk, middle-aged folk perhaps, they had their chat from the Queen as well. While the Queen and Prince Philip were walking through, there was a football match going on. Now, the elegant-looking ones are Pan's people. You should be able to recognize them. The others are Disney characters. There was a game played very roughly according to the rules of Football Association. no Brian Moore to give commentary, so I haven't the slightest idea who won, but I know some of the dads there quite enjoyed watching one of the teams play anyway. No prizes for guessing which one. Somebody being sent off there by the look of it. Looks like Tigger, one of Disney's characters based on that great Winnie the Pooh character. Now, believe it or not, somewhere in there is the Queen. Really was, as I've said, a wonderful occasion when not quite everything went, of course not, but people were given really almost limitless opportunities to get in close, to see the Queen and to talk with her.
I have a call.
Not for the first time over the years. Prince Philip has chatted on a little bit longer than others, and Queen just waiting as they go on to the next stop.
He's wobbling. I think Sid's going to go. He's looking very tired. Poor old Sid. Lost the first round with Fearless Fred. I think a big cheer over this side. Come, let's have a really big cheer for poor old Sid, poor Sid. Look at him trying to fight that big dinosaur. 1, 2, 3, hooray! Give him another one. Hooray! Up. And again. Right, simple Sid. I think this is it. Your
Queen and Prince Philip were now on their way to the ox roast. This was being carried out by a team of cooks from the Territorial Army and the voluntary reserve of the Army Catering Corps. You didn't have to be anywhere around the ox roasting area for long before you realised that they were in fact roasting something. You mightn't have known it at first sniff that it was an ox, but that's what it proved to be. So it was getting towards lunchtime, and perhaps Queen and Prince Philip thinking, well, we may be able to have a slice of ox to keep us going before we get back later on to Buckingham Palace for lunch. Not, mind you, that there was any sign that they wanted to get away. If I say that everybody there was enjoying themselves, I mean exactly that, and that includes the party's royal visitors.
While we're waiting for the police to enter the arena, perhaps we could just ask you not to block, please, the main entrance between the two white marquees to the left of this dais. Because in a little while time we'll have about 50 or 60 horses galloping
So it was
down there,
on to the ox.
which can be a little bit painful. So we can keep that run out between the two white marquees completely clear, please.
An ox is being roasted each day, weighing something over 6,000 pounds. And each of the oxes was selected by the Queen's forester from the Queen's own herd at Windsor. The Army Catering Corps, I think, has only cooked an ox just once before, and that was at the Queen's Jubilee bonfire at Windsor a couple of years ago. Then it certainly went down a treat. I was fortunate enough to be there and to actually have a piece.
Could clear that, please, otherwise they might find they're going to be mown down by a police car.
I think I ought to make a correction there. 600 pounds would be the weight of the ox, not 6,000. Never was too good with all those noughts. I expect some of you spotted it. It wasn't a deliberate mistake there. An ox weighing 600 pounds. Prince Philip certainly isn't going to leave without having a taste.
You waiting for some?
Yeah.
It's worth waiting for.
Get me some.
Well, that's recommendation enough. The Prince Philip Good Ox Cook Guide. Of course, that wasn't the only food that was being cooked. You must have heard of the world's longest sausage. And of course, if you were watching our coverage earlier today, you saw Tommy Boyd of Magpie having a look at the 2 miles of sausage. And the Queen duly passed it by. But here it was a chance for the still photographers from Fleet Street and the provincial papers to have a, well, almost a session with the Queen. But the steam that's rising is, take my word for it, something to do with the world's longest sausage. And then came one of the highlights of the proceedings this morning, the drop by the Red Devils. 8 free-fall parachutists coming in by helicopter from their base down in Hampshire at Aldershot, and doing, well, this very, very daring, very skillful precision parachute drop. Queen looking up just a little bit anxiously. And one of the parachutists, Sergeant Major Lavington, had a very special message that he was carrying to the Queen. It came from the General Secretary of the United Nations, Kurt Waldheim, and it was his job not to land in the main arena as most of the other parachutists were, but right by the Queen. Always amazes me the speed at which they come down at the last few feet, and yet they just land and walk away as though they'd stepped off an 18-inch high step. So, the message from the Secretary General of the United Nations. What a way to deliver a letter. It really is unbelievable that they can be as precise in picking their landing spot as they are.